My name is Rose Miller, and I am 64 years old. The day I discovered that my only son wanted me dead was the day my heart broke into pieces. Imagine raising a child with every ounce of your love, sacrificing your youth, your dreams, your very health, only to hear him whisper on the phone that your life is nothing more than a disposable ticket. The sound of his voice plotting my death felt like knives twisting inside me. That moment, I realized this was not just betrayal. This was a tragedy so deep that it would either destroy me completely or awaken a side of me he never imagined. Before I go on, I want to ask you something. What would you do if the very person you gave life to, the one you trusted more than anyone, turned against you? Could you forgive? Could you survive? Or would you fight back? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I need to know, have you ever been betrayed by family? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is not just my story. It's a warning, a lesson, and perhaps the fight of my life. It all began 3 days earlier in what seemed like a beautiful, innocent gesture. Michael, my only son, showed up at my house wearing a smile I hadn't seen in years. His wife Linda stood behind him, her eyes glittering with something I couldn't quite read. In his hands, he carried a golden envelope, the kind of thing you see in glossy travel magazines, shimmering with promise. "Mom," he said, hugging me tightly, almost too tightly. "Linda and I wanted to surprise you. You've worked so hard your whole life, sacrificed everything for me. So, we bought you something special." When I opened the envelope and saw the first-class cruise tickets, my eyes blurred with tears. 7 days in the Caribbean. A dream I had postponed for decades, always saying no to myself so Michael could say yes to his future. The names of the islands glowed like jewels on the itinerary: St. Lucia, Barbados, Antigua. A floating palace, luxury meals, sunsets over turquoise seas. "Michael, this must have cost a fortune," I whispered, my hands trembling as I touched the tickets. "There's no price on your happiness, Mom," he said softly, his eyes warm, or at least they looked warm. "You deserve this more than anyone. Fresh sea air, quiet mornings, no stress. It's time you lived a little." His words melted my heart, but not completely. You see, by 64, you learn to read between the lines of people's eyes. Something in his gaze felt off. His pupils shifted, avoiding mine, as though a secret was dancing just behind his smile. But I silenced that instinct. He was my son, my Michael. The feverish baby I had once rocked through sleepless nights, the little boy who held my hand at his father's funeral, the teenager who whispered his first heartbreak into my arms. How could I doubt him? "When do I leave?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound excited. "The day after tomorrow," he said quickly. "Everything is arranged. Linda made sure of the details. All you need to do is pack." That night, as I laid out my clothes on the bed, folding dresses and swimsuits, I felt a strange ache in my chest. Not from my blood pressure, but from a voice inside whispering that something wasn't right. Michael had been distant for months. He rarely visited, barely called, always had excuses. And now, suddenly, this overwhelming gesture of love? I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, he had realized how much I had given and wanted to repay me. I told myself I was just being paranoid, the way older women sometimes doubt kindness because life has taught us it's rare. 2 days later, I was ready. My suitcase stood by the door. I had my passport, my hat, my sunglasses. But just as I was leaving, I remembered my blood pressure pills. Without them, 7 days at sea could be dangerous. I rushed back inside, climbed the stairs, and opened the bathroom cabinet. And that was the moment my curse and my salvation. From the hallway, I heard Michael's voice. Calm, steady, but laced with ice. He was on the phone with Linda. "Yes, honey. She's on her way to the port. She suspects nothing. The plan is perfect. It's a one-way trip. Once she's out at sea, it will be easy to make it look like an accident. Who would ever question an old woman falling overboard?" My entire body froze. My hand gripped the edge of the cabinet until my knuckles turned white. My son's words hit me harder than any storm could. And then came the part that shattered me. "Don't worry about money. Between the $200,000 life insurance and the house inheritance, we'll clear all the debts. We can finally start over." Life insurance. My home. My life reduced to a bank transaction. I felt tears burn my cheeks, but not from sadness alone. Rage roared inside me. Rage at him, rage at Linda, rage at myself for being blind all these years. In that split second, standing behind the door of my own home, I made a vow. If my son thought his mother was a weak, helpless old woman, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Because at 64, after decades of sacrifice, grief, and survival, I was no longer just a mother. I was a fighter. And if he wanted to play dirty, I was going to show him how it's truly done. When I closed the door behind me that day, clutching the secret I had overheard, my mind did what it always does in moments of terror. It raced backward through time. I couldn't stop remembering the life I had lived, the years I had poured into my son, the decades of sacrifice that had brought me to this moment. You see, my story didn't begin with betrayal. It began with love, the kind of love that strips you of everything and still asks you to give more. I was just 20 years old when I married Michael's father. He was tall, handsome, and reckless, with a laugh that could light up a room. We didn't have much, just a one-bedroom apartment, a second-hand couch, and dreams bigger than our bank account. But we had each other. And then, soon enough, we had Michael. From the moment I held him, tiny and red-faced, I felt my life rearrange itself around his heartbeat. I whispered promises into his ear in the hospital. I will never let you suffer, my boy. I will never let you go hungry. I will fight the whole world if I have to. And for years I kept those promises, even when the world made it nearly impossible. My husband died when Michael was 12, a car accident on a rainy night. One moment we were a family of 3, the next I was a widow with a grieving child. People told me I was strong, but I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow, terrified, a ghost trying to keep the lights on. But Michael needed me, and so I decided that his future would be my only mission. I quit my job as a secretary because the hours kept me away from him. Instead, I sold our car, pawned the little jewelry I had, and started sewing clothes from home. I would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, the hum of the sewing machine my only companion, stitching dresses for neighbors just to make enough for tuition and groceries. Sometimes I pricked my fingers so badly they bled onto the fabric, and I would scrub the stains out with salt water before delivering the orders with a forced smile. Michael never saw those stains. I didn't want him to. While other women my age went on vacations, bought nice dresses, or even just treated themselves to a night out, I counted coins in glass jars to pay for textbooks. When he had a fever, I stayed awake with cold towels on his forehead, whispering prayers into the night. When bullies teased him for wearing secondhand shoes, I told him, "One day, you'll walk in shoes better than theirs, because I will make sure you get there." Every penny I earned went into his future. I gave up haircuts, new clothes, and doctor visits for myself. I told myself that it didn't matter if my back ached, if my lungs filled with dust from the old fabrics, if my hands cracked and bled. None of it mattered, as long as Michael had what he needed. When he finally graduated from college, the one I could barely afford but somehow scraped together enough, for I felt like I had won the lottery. I remember standing in the crowd of parents, holding a bouquet of cheap carnations because I couldn't afford roses, and crying so hard that people stared. They didn't know that every thread I had sewn, every night I had starved quietly so Michael could eat, every lonely hour at that sewing machine had been poured into that diploma. And for years afterward, I held on to the belief that all of it meant something. That someday, my son would look back and say, "Mom, I see what you did for me. I'll take care of you now." But that day never came. When Michael married Linda, I thought my sacrifices had finally blossomed into joy. I imagined Sunday dinners with laughter, grandchildren running through the yard, family photos with smiles that were real. But from the very first day, Linda's eyes told me a different story. She looked at me as though I were a burden, an old relic taking up space in her perfect world. I tried to win her over. I cooked for them, bought gifts I couldn't afford, bit my tongue when she made little comments about how small my house was or how outdated my furniture looked. I told myself it didn't matter, that if Michael was happy, I would be happy. But the more years passed, the more I saw him pulling away, slipping through my fingers like sand. He stopped visiting as often. Phone calls turned from long conversations into short, distracted check-ins. When I asked about his work, he changed the subject. When I asked about his marriage, he smiled too tightly. There were cracks, but I told myself it was normal. Life was stressful. They were busy. But now, looking back, I realized the truth. The cracks weren't in his life. They were in his character. There had been warnings I ignored. The time I arrived at his house unannounced and heard him yelling on the phone about money, only for him to hang up abruptly when he saw me. The time I overheard Linda telling a friend that she wished I lived farther away, that they needed more privacy. The way Michael brushed it off, saying I had misunderstood, insisting that Linda loved me dearly. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that all my years of sacrifice had built something unbreakable, but I was wrong. As the taxi carried me toward the cruise ship, the city flashing by outside the window, I replayed those sacrifices in my mind. Every choice I had made, every dollar I had surrendered, every dream I had crushed beneath my own feet for him. And what did it all lead to? A golden envelope that was really a death sentence. For a moment, the pain was unbearable. I pressed my hand against the glass, fighting the tears. How foolish I had been to think that love could guarantee loyalty. How blind I had been to ignore the signs. But then, something shifted. All those years of sacrifice, those nights at the sewing machine, those days of hunger, those decades of silence hadn't just broken me, they had forged me. I was not a fragile old woman. I was steel that had been tempered in fire. I was a mother who had survived every storm life had thrown at me. And if Michael wanted to play this game, then I would use every ounce of that hard-earned strength. The boy I had raised had become my enemy. But he had also forgotten one crucial truth. I had raised him, which meant I knew him better than he knew himself. The taxi jolted over a pothole, and I clutched my purse tighter, as though it were the only anchor keeping me steady. My mind, however, was anything but steady. I kept rewinding, replaying, forcing myself to face all the signs I had ignored. It's strange, isn't it? How hindsight feels like a cruel trick. Once you know the truth, every little memory reshapes itself into evidence. Every shrug, every half-smile, every vague answer at all becomes a flashing warning sign. And suddenly, I couldn't stop seeing them. Michael had been distant for months, almost a year, if I was being honest with myself. The boy who once sat at the kitchen table every evening to tell me about his day now barely picked up the phone. When he did call, his words were hurried, shallow, like he was on his way out the door. "Work's fine, Mom. Don't worry about me. Linda and I are just busy. We'll visit soon. You know how life is." Each time, I told myself it was normal. After all, he was married, building his own life. But deep down, I felt the shift. His voice carried something, a restlessness, a kind of unease he tried to bury. Then there was that night, 6 months ago, when I dropped by his house unannounced. I had baked his favorite apple pie, thinking I would surprise him. Instead, I was the one surprised. His voice thundered through the closed door before I even knocked. "I don't care, I'll get the money somehow, just give me more time." I froze. Then silence. When the door opened, Michael's face was pale. He forced a smile, pulling me inside quickly. "Mom, what a surprise. Sorry, just a work thing. Clients can be so unreasonable." He cut the pie awkwardly, his hands shaking. I should have pressed him. I should have demanded to know who he owed money to. But instead, I smoothed his hair back like when he was a boy and told him to eat before it got cold. I see it so clearly now, the desperation in his eyes, the storm he was hiding, and I turned away because I didn't want to believe my son could be drowning. And then, there was Linda. Oh, Linda. The first time I met her, I knew she didn't like me. She smiled politely, kissed my cheek. But her eyes carried that silent disdain some women have when they see a mother-in-law as competition instead of family. She saw me as an obstacle, not as a mother who wanted to love her. Once, I overheard her whispering to a friend, "I wish Rose didn't live so close. We need our space." It cut me like a blade, but when I mentioned it to Michael, he shook his head. "You misunderstood, Mom. She loves you. You know how women talk sometimes." And like a fool, I accepted his words, because the alternative that my son would allow his wife to dismiss me was too painful to face. All those moments stacked together like bricks, building a wall of denial that I willingly hid behind. And then came the golden envelope. 3 days ago, Michael arrived at my doorstep, carrying it like a holy offering. Linda stood just behind him, her smile too wide, too rehearsed. "Mom," he said, embracing me with a sudden warmth that felt unfamiliar. "We have something for you." He handed me the envelope, the shimmering gold catching the sunlight. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside were the cruise tickets, first class, Caribbean, 7 days of paradise. My heart leapt and sank at the same time. "Michael, this must have cost so much. You shouldn't have." He cupped my hands, his voice soft. "There's no price for your happiness. You've worked your whole life. You've sacrificed everything for me. Now it's your turn to rest, to breathe, to see the world." I felt tears well up, real tears. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was the boy I had raised, finally giving back, finally seeing me. But when I looked into his eyes, something flickered. A shadow, a hesitation. He held my gaze just long enough to sell the lie, but not long enough to make me believe it. And then Linda spoke, her voice like honey dipped in vinegar. "You deserve this, Rose. It'll be good for you. A change of scenery. You'll come back refreshed, a whole new woman." I forced a smile, but a knot tightened in my stomach. Still, I convinced myself I was overthinking. "When do I leave?" I asked, trying to match their excitement. "The day after tomorrow," Michael said quickly. Too quickly. "Everything is arranged. You just have to pack and show up." Linda took care of all the details. I remember clutching that envelope like it was treasure. I remember thanking them, hugging them, telling them how grateful I was. And I remember the flicker in Linda's eyes, like she was suppressing a smirk. That night, I laid out my clothes on the bed. A sun hat, a light cardigan, sandals I hadn't worn in years. I told myself it was real, that my son loved me, that he wanted me to live. But as I folded my dresses into the suitcase, I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. The house was quiet, yet my mind was loud with questions. Why now? Why such extravagance after months of silence? Why did his voice sound so eager, so rehearsed? I dismissed it as paranoia. I told myself I was being silly, that old age was making me suspicious. I whispered in the dark, "Stop doubting him, Rose. He's your son. He loves you. Accept the gift." And yet, 2 days later, with my suitcase packed, my passport ready, and my heart torn between excitement and dread, I forgot one small thing: my blood pressure pills. That forgotten bottle, sitting quietly in the bathroom cabinet, changed everything. I walked back into my house, soft steps on familiar floorboards, and there it was, his voice, Michael's voice, cold, calculating, cruel. And in that instant, the golden envelope was no longer a gift. It was a coffin. I can still hear his voice. Sometimes, even now, it echoes in my head like a nightmare on repeat. That cold tone, so different from the warm sun I thought I knew. Standing in the hallway of my own house, clutching the edge of the doorframe, I felt like I was listening to a stranger wearing my son's skin. "Don't worry, honey," Michael said into the phone, his words steady, practiced. "It's a one-way ticket. Once she's on the high seas, it'll be easy to make it look like an accident. Who's going to suspect an old woman falling overboard?" My heart stopped. My ears rang. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard, that my mind was twisting his words into something monstrous. But then came the sentence that shattered every illusion I had left. Between the life insurance $200,000 and the house, that's at least another $300,000, enough to clear the debts and start over. No one will question it. We'll play the grieving children perfectly. My knees almost gave out. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting to stay upright. My own son was speaking about my death like a transaction, like he was ordering groceries. The boy I had raised, the man I had bled and worked for, was calmly planning to erase me for cash. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't the soft, grieving tears of a mother. They were hot, searing tears of fury. My chest burned as though fire had been lit inside me. Linda's voice crackled faintly through the phone, though I couldn't make out all her words. I only caught pieces. Insurance? She won't suspect. Finally free. My daughter-in-law, the woman I had welcomed into my family with open arms, was co-conspiring to murder me. At that moment, something in me cracked. No, not cracked, transformed. I had spent decades as the woman who sacrificed, who kept quiet, who gave until she was hollow. But betrayal this deep does not leave you weak. It leaves you sharp. It leaves you dangerous. I steadied my breathing. If Michael thought I would fall like a naive old woman, he was wrong. He had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten what I had survived. Widowhood, poverty, loneliness. Sleepless nights with hunger gnawing at my stomach while I saved the last piece of bread for him. I had been fighting my entire life. And now, for the first time, I would fight for myself. I whispered inside my mind. If this is how it will be, Michael, then we will play it your way, but you will regret it 3 times over. I closed the cabinet softly, careful not to make a sound. Every movement became deliberate, controlled. I could not let them know I had heard. I picked up my pill bottle, slipped it into my purse, and tiptoed toward the door. My son's voice still drifted from the living room, low and confident, plotting my death as if it were nothing more than business. I stepped outside, letting the door click shut behind me, as though I had simply forgotten my medicine and nothing more. To anyone watching, I was just a 64-year-old woman heading to a taxi with her luggage. But inside, my mind was already spinning faster than it ever had in my life. I would go on this cruise. Oh yes, I would. But not as the victim he imagined. I would go as a hunter, silent and patient. Because Michael had underestimated me. He thought age meant weakness. He thought sacrifice meant blindness. But age had given me patience, and sacrifice had given me endurance. I knew how to wait. I knew how to plan. And more than anything, I knew how to turn pain into power. In the taxi, as the city blurred past the window, I replayed the words over and over. A one-way ticket. Life insurance. Enough to pay off the debts. Debts. That was the key. He wasn't doing this because he hated me, at least not at first. He was desperate. Gambling, maybe. Bad loans. Dangerous people. My son had dug himself a hole so deep that he decided to bury me inside it. That realization stung worse than the betrayal itself, because it meant Michael wasn't just greedy, he was reckless, selfish, drowning. And instead of asking for help, he had chosen to kill the very woman who would have given him everything one last time. But he had made one fatal mistake. He believed I was powerless. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, worn card I had kept for months. Victor Stone, private investigator. I had met him through a neighbor, a kind man with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority. At the time, I had thought it silly to hold on to his number. What could an old woman like me possibly need with a detective? Now, that little card felt like salvation. As soon as I boarded the ship, I would call him. I would tell him everything. I would have him dig into Michael's life, his debts, his lies. If Michael thought this was just between us, he was wrong. I would not face him unarmed. The taxi slowed, pulling toward the massive port. The cruise ship loomed like a floating skyscraper, gleaming white under the Sunday families bustled with luggage. Children laughed, couples snapped photos. Everyone was here for paradise. And me? I was here to survive my own son's death sentence. I stepped out, clutching my suitcase, and for the first time in days, a strange calm washed over me. Fear was still there, yes, but beneath it was something stronger. Determination. I would not let Michael win. As I walked up the ramp toward the ship's entrance, I whispered under my breath, words meant for him though he couldn't hear them. You think you've written the end of my story, Michael, but I'm the one holding the pen, and you're about to regret underestimating your mother. The Caribbean star towered above me like a gleaming white fortress. 12 stories of luxury, glass balconies glittering in the sun, banners fluttering in the sea breeze. All around me, laughter and excitement filled the air, families taking selfies, children bouncing with joy, couples wrapped in each other's arms. For them, this ship meant paradise. For me, it meant survival. I dragged my suitcase up the boarding ramp, keeping my steps steady, my expression sweet, exactly the way Michael expected me to look. A fragile old woman, grateful for her son's generosity. The attendant at the check-in counter smiled at me warmly. Mrs. Rose Miller? First-time cruiser? Yes, I said, matching her smile with a soft, tremulous one. My son gifted me this trip. He says I need to relax. How considerate of him, she said as she handed back my passport. 7 days of heaven at sea. You're going to love it. If only she knew. I thanked her and walked onto the ship, the air-conditioned hallway cool against my skin. My heart beat like a drum in my chest, but my face never betrayed it. I had learned long ago that survival begins with masks. And today, mine was the mask of a grateful mother. The cabin Michael had booked was on the 8th floor, with a private balcony overlooking the endless blue. It was beautiful, too beautiful. White sheets, polished wood, a little vase of flowers by the window. But all I saw was the balcony railing, gleaming in the sunlight, and I knew instantly why he had chosen this room. a perfect stage for an accident. One slip, one scream swallowed by the waves. No witnesses. Just another story of a woman lost at sea. I ran my hand over the railing, forcing myself to study it with cold precision. It was waist-high, easy to lean over, easy to fall. My stomach tightened, but I didn't let fear control me. Instead, I took out my phone and dialed the number I had been carrying for months. 3 rings. Then a deep, steady voice. Detective Victor Stone. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak. "Hello, Detective. My name is Rose Miller. We met months ago. My neighbor introduced us. I need your help. It's a matter of life and death." A pause. I could almost hear his skepticism through the line. "Life and death, Mrs. Miller?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My son is trying to kill me." Silence. Then, "Are you certain?" I closed my eyes, replaying Michael's words. I overheard him plotting it with his wife. They bought me a one-way cruise ticket. They want to make it look like I fell overboard. He's after my life insurance, my house, everything. Victor exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Miller, those are very serious accusations. Do you have proof?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I will. I'm on the ship now. I need you to dig into his life, his finances, his debts, his lies. I need evidence that will hold up in court." Another pause. Then his tone shifted professional, serious. "Where are you right now?" "Cabin 847, 8th floor, on the Caribbean Star cruise ship. We sail in less than an hour. I'll be out of contact for 7 days, but when I return, I need to have everything you can find." "All right, I'll need an advance $500. I'll text you my account details." "Done," I said without hesitation. "And Mrs. Miller," he added, his voice softer now, "be careful. If what you say is true, you're in real danger. Don't underestimate them. Don't make yourself an easy target." I let out a bitter laugh. "Detective, I've survived poverty, widowhood, and raising a child alone. Believe me, I won't go down easy." When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the endless blue horizon. The ship's horn sounded, deep and haunting, and I felt the faint vibration as we began to move away from the port. Each passing mile carried me further from land, further from safety, further into Michael's trap. But it also carried me closer to the truth, closer to the evidence I needed, closer to revenge. I stood and opened my suitcase, pulling out a small notebook. I drew 3 columns across the first page. Evidence, allies, risks. In the evidence column I wrote, one-way ticket, overheard phone call, life insurance, inheritance, balzone room. In the allies column, Detective Victor Stone. Potential crew members? In the risks column, Michael, Linda. Unknown accomplices. The unknown scared me most. If Michael had planned this carefully, he might not be acting alone. He could have bribed a crew member, hired someone to shadow me, maybe even disguised an accomplice as a passenger. I snapped the notebook shut. Paranoia would only paralyze me. What I needed now was information. I had 7 days to learn the ship inside and out, to find allies and to gather proof. So, I left the cabin and began to explore. The hallways smelled faintly of lemon polish, lined with patterned carpet that muffled footsteps. Cameras hung from the ceilings at every corner, comforting, but also a reminder that someone could be watching. I noted the locations, every blind spot, every emergency exit. On the top deck, the pool sparkled, surrounded by sunbathers sipping colorful cocktails. A DJ blasted cheerful music, children splashed, waiters in white uniforms carried trays of drinks. But I wasn't there for leisure. I studied the railings, the stairways, the isolated corners where an accident could happen unnoticed. In the main restaurant, the chandeliers glittered above linen-covered tables. I sat by the window, pretending to enjoy a plate of fruit while scanning the room. Couples, families, retirees, all laughing, all relaxed. I envied them. For me, every face was a question. Could they be watching me? Then, just as I was about to leave, I noticed her. A woman about my age, sitting alone at a nearby table. Silver hair neatly styled, an elegant red dress hugging her figure, a book open in her hands. There was something in her posture graceful, dignified, but also sharp, alert. Our eyes met for just a second, and she smiled warmly. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years, genuine, kind, the kind of smile women our age share when they recognize one another's scars. I hesitated, then walked over. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Would you mind if I sit with you? I hate eating alone." She looked up, her eyes intelligent, her voice warm. "Please, join me. I'm Carol Baker, from Miami. And you?" "Rose Miller, from Chicago. A pleasure." And just like that, a spark of hope flickered in my chest. Sitting across from Carol in that elegant dining room felt like taking a breath after being held underwater for too long. The ship hummed gently beneath us, silverware clinked against porcelain plates, laughter drifted through the air. But for the first time since I had boarded, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't fear. It was connection. Carol closed her book and leaned slightly forward. She had the kind of poise you only see in women who have lived long, hard lives and somehow emerged with dignity intact. "So, Rose," she said, her voice carrying a faint accent I couldn't quite place, "what brings you on this cruise? First time?" "Yes," I admitted, forcing a small smile. "My son Michael, he surprised me with the trip, said I needed a break." "Ah, children," she said with a soft chuckle, though her eyes flickered with something sharper. "Mine insisted I come too, said I needed to relax, to enjoy life a little. At first I resisted, but here I am." Her words rang in my ears. Her children insisted. Mine had too, and the similarities felt too uncanny to ignore. For a moment, I debated telling her the truth. My heart wanted to pour everything out, to hand the weight I carried to someone else, even just for a moment. But Detective Victor's warning echoed in my head. Don't trust too easily. Don't put yourself at risk. So I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. It's strange, isn't it? How our children sometimes push us toward things we didn't plan for. And we, being mothers, always want to believe they're acting out of love. Carol tilted her head, studying me. Her eyes weren't the soft eyes of a casual acquaintance, they were sharp, reading between the lines. After a long pause, she spoke again. "You don't look like a woman on vacation, Rose. You look like a woman carrying something heavy." Her words pierced me, and for a second, I thought I might cry, but I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a laugh. Maybe it's just nerves. First time on a ship this size, it can be overwhelming. She smiled knowingly. "I've lived 62 years. I know the look of a woman in trouble. If you ever want to talk, I'm in cabin 1247, 12th floor. You don't even have to knock, just come in. Sometimes strangers make the best allies." Her kindness cracked something in me. A stranger offering me more comfort than my own son. I thanked her, and we spent the rest of the meal exchanging stories about our lives. She told me about being a widow, raising children alone, running her own small business. Every detail she shared felt like a mirror to my own struggles. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That night, alone in my cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about Carol. Could I trust her, or was that dangerous? Michael had underestimated me, but I couldn't underestimate him either. If he had gone so far as to plot my murder, could he have someone on this ship watching me? I decided to be cautious. I emailed Detective Victor from the ship's library computer, sending a quick, costly message. "I'm fine. Investigate Michael's gambling debts. I think that's the key. I may have found an ally on board." The next morning, I saw Carol again at breakfast. She waved me over as though we had been friends for years. Her warmth disarmed me. Over coffee, she leaned in and asked quietly, "Did you sleep well, Rose?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not really. Too much on my mind." "Let me guess," she said softly. "Your son. This gift, the sudden change in his behavior?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "How did you—" "Because I know the signs," she said simply. "When someone gives too much too suddenly, it's rarely without reason. I've lived long enough to know that love can sometimes hide knives." Her words made my heart pound. Could I tell her? Should I? I looked into her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a gossip or a meddler. They were the eyes of a woman who had been cut by betrayal and had lived to tell the tale. So I whispered, barely audible, "My son is trying to kill me." Carol didn't flinch. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt. She simply nodded, as though she had been waiting for me to say it. "Tell me everything." And I did. Over the next hour, I told her about the golden envelope, about the overheard phone call, about the life insurance and the inheritance. I told her about the one-way ticket, about Michael's debts, about Linda's cold complicity. When I finished, Carol sat back, her face grave. "Rose, you are in very real danger, but you're not alone anymore. We'll face this together." Her certainty shocked me. "Carol, I can't ask you." "You're not asking," she interrupted firmly. "I'm offering. I've buried 2 husbands, raised children, run a business. I'm not afraid of a spoiled man, child who thinks money is worth more than a mother's life." Her words lit a fire in me. For the first time since I'd overheard Michael's plan, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a partner. That evening, as we walked the ship's deck together, Carol leaned closer. "Rose, if Michael wants you dead on this ship, he'll have to make contact. He'll call you, check in, pretend to care. That's when we'll catch him. We'll record his words. Every conversation can become a weapon." Her plan was brilliant, simple but brilliant, and it was exactly the kind of strategy I needed. When night fell, Carol helped me move my essentials into her cabin. "Safer this way," she said. "If they come looking for you, they won't find you." Her suite was larger, with 2 beds and a wider balcony. As I unpacked, Carol asked detailed questions about Michael. "Was he always manipulative?" she asked. I sighed. "He was always clever. From a young age, he knew how to get what he wanted. I thought it was just childish charm. I never imagined it could grow into this." "And Linda?" "At first, they seemed happy. But lately, I've seen cracks. She complains about money, about wanting more, about needing a bigger house. And Michael always promises things will get better." Carol nodded grimly. "And now we know how he planned to make them better." At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. "Michael." Carol glanced at me, her phone already set to record. "Make him talk," she whispered. "Let him betray himself." I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Michael." "Hi, Mom. How's the cruise? Are you enjoying yourself?" His voice was smooth, loving, exactly what anyone would expect from a devoted son. But I knew better. And now, with Carol by my side, I had the chance to turn his lies into evidence. Michael's voice poured through the phone like honey, smooth and practiced, but beneath it I could hear the metallic clang of calculation. "It's beautiful, son," I said, forcing warmth into my tone. "The ship is incredible. Thank you for this gift." "You deserve it, Mom," he replied quickly. "Have you met anyone? Making new friends?" The question struck me like a whip. Why would he care? Why would it matter if I were alone or not? I caught Carol's eyes. She mouthed the words, "He's checking." "Yes," I said casually. "I met a very nice lady named Carol. We've been having meals together." A beat of silence. Then Michael's cheerful tone returned, just a little too forced. "That's great, Mom. Just be careful, okay? Sometimes people take advantage of older passengers." Carol raised her eyebrows, writing a note on her pad. "He's planting doubt about me. Don't let him divide us." I smiled, keeping my voice calm. "Don't worry, Michael. I'm cautious." We spoke a few minutes more, him circling around, asking about the ship, my cabin, whether I was sleeping well. His words seemed caring, but I knew what he was doing, probing, checking if I was following his plan. When the call ended, Carol stopped the recording and pressed my hand. "You see? He's worried. Not about your safety, about control. He wanted to confirm you were in that cabin, alone, vulnerable." I nodded, my throat tight. "He doesn't realize I'm 2 steps ahead." The next morning, we put our plan into action. We went straight to the cruise office, a bright space on the 3rd deck where uniformed staff greeted passengers with polite smiles. A young woman named Patricia typed my details into her computer. "Mrs. Miller, you have a reservation for the 7-day Caribbean cruise," she said, then frowned. "But there's no return flight booked to Chicago." I gripped the counter. Carol leaned in. "What do you mean?" "Well, normally our packages include round-trip airfare, but here it only shows a one-way ticket." My heart sank. Even knowing the truth, hearing it confirmed officially made the betrayal feel fresh, jagged. "And who booked this package?" I asked, though I already knew. "Michael Miller. Credit card in his name." Patricia's voice was kind, professional, but every word cut like glass. Carol spoke firmly. "Can Mrs. Miller buy her own return flight now, to ensure she's not stranded?" Patricia tapped her keyboard. "Yes, there's a seat available on Sunday afternoon, when the cruise ends, $750. "I'll take it," I said immediately, handing over my credit card. As Patricia processed the purchase, Carol leaned close and whispered, That's our first concrete piece of evidence. He never intended for you to come back." I nodded, my chest tight. The ticket in my hand was more than a way home, it was proof. Proof of premeditation. Back in Carol's cabin, we spread out what we had: the recording of Michael's call, the receipt for the one-way ticket, and now my newly purchased return. Each piece was another nail in the coffin of his plan. But the more evidence we gathered, the more dangerous it became. Because Michael wasn't stupid. He would try again. And he wasn't the only threat. That afternoon by the pool, I felt it. Eyes on me. A man in a green shirt sat at the bar, pretending to sip a drink, but every time I glanced his way, his gaze flicked toward me. "Carol," I whispered. "The man by the bar. He's watching us." She turned casually, then looked back at me with grim certainty. "You're right. Let's test him." She got up, walked away as though heading to the restroom. I stayed, pretending to adjust my sun hat. The man didn't follow her. His eyes stayed fixed on me. When Carol returned, she confirmed it. "He's not interested in me. He's watching you." My skin prickled. Michael had planted someone on this ship. That night, as we ate dinner in Carol's cabin to stay safe, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Linda. "Rose," she said brightly, too brightly. "How's the cruise?" I forced cheer. "It's wonderful, thank you so much." "That's great," she said. "Michael told me you sounded happy. We just wanted you to relax, to disconnect for a while." The same words Michael had used. Disconnect. Their script was rehearsed. I pressed. "Linda, when I checked my documents, there was no return ticket. Do you know anything about that?" A pause. Too long. Then a nervous laugh. "Oh, that must be a system error. Michael handled everything. Don't worry, we'll fix it." "I already bought my own return," I said calmly. "Didn't want to take any risks." Another pause. Her voice wavered. "Oh, well, that wasn't necessary, Rose. But good thinking." Carol scribbled furiously on her pad. "She's in on it." When the call ended, I stared at my phone. My hands shook, not from fear anymore, but from rage. My son and his wife, both of them plotting my death. The next day, we decided to confront the man in the green shirt. But carefully, in public, Carol suggested the casino. "Predators like to approach when they think you're weak," she explained. "Pretend to be a little drunk. He'll take the bait." So I sat at a slot machine, swaying slightly, muttering to myself like I'd had too many mimosas. Sure enough, within minutes, the man approached. "Ma'am, are you all right? You look a little ditzy." I smiled sloppily. "Too much champagne at breakfast," I said. "My son gave me this trip, says I need to relax." His eyes lit up. "What a thoughtful son. Where is he now?" "Oh, back in Chicago. This trip is just for me. A special gift." He leaned closer. "You must explore the top deck at night. The view is beautiful, but be careful, those railings can be dangerous when the ship is rocking." The words sent a chill down my spine. He was probing, planting the exact scenario Michael wanted. I told him my cabin number, pretending to be careless. His smile widened. Minutes later, Carol followed him discreetly and overheard his call. "Yes, she's in cabin 847, balcony. Afraid of the railings. Perfect." When Carol repeated those words to me, my blood ran cold. There was no more doubt. Michael had planted an accomplice on this ship. We returned to her cabin, locked the door, and laid out the truth between us. I wasn't just fighting Michael and Linda from afar. I was trapped at sea with someone ready to finish the job. But as fear tightened around me, Carol's voice cut through it, calm and fierce. "Rose, we're not just going to survive this. We're going to catch them. We're going to make them choke on their own plan. And when this is over, they'll regret underestimating you." For the first time, I believed her. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could win. The morning sun spilled across the ship's deck, golden and serene, but inside me was a storm. I barely touched my breakfast as Carol laid out our next move with the precision of a general. "Tomorrow night is the captain's gala," she said, her eyes sharp over her coffee cup. "Every passenger will be in the grand hall until late. That's when your son's accomplice will strike. He'll expect you to return to your cabin, tired from the party. He'll be waiting." Her calm tone belied the danger of her words. I shivered. "So you think they'll make their move tomorrow?" Carol nodded firmly. "Yes, and that's when we'll trap them. That afternoon, we arranged a meeting with Captain James Harrison. He was a tall man with silver hair, crisp uniform, and an air of authority that made me feel, for the first time, truly protected. We laid everything out: the overheard phone call, the one-way ticket, the suspicious man, the recordings of Michael's and Linda's carefully rehearsed conversations. Carol even mimicked the man's voice, as he suggested I enjoy the view from the railings. The captain's expression darkened as he listened. "Mrs. Miller, if what you're telling me is true, we're dealing with attempted premeditated murder on my ship. That will not be tolerated." He called in 2 of his security officers, both men with sharp eyes and discreet earpieces. "We'll set a sting. Tomorrow night you'll attend the gala exactly as planned. Afterward, instead of returning to your cabin, you'll hide in a secure location. My team will monitor your cabin and intercept anyone who tries to enter." He handed me a small device the size of a pen. "A panic alarm. If you ever feel threatened, press this. My men will be there in seconds." I held it tightly in my hand, as if it were my lifeline. "Captain, I don't just want to survive this. I want evidence. I want to make sure my son pays." The captain's eyes met mine. "You'll have it. I promise." That night, Carol and I rehearsed our plan like 2 actresses preparing for opening night. She reminded me of every detail. Keep my phone recording during Michael's calls, answer his questions naturally, let him think everything is going according to plan. By Thursday afternoon, the ship buzzed with anticipation for the gala. Crew members polished the chandeliers, musicians rehearsed in the hall, passengers compared dresses and jewelry like children on Christmas morning. But for me, this wasn't a party, it was a battlefield. I stood in front of the mirror in Carol's suite, smoothing down my green satin dress. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted my necklace. At 64, I hadn't expected to be dressing for war in evening wear. Carol stepped beside me, stunning in a golden gown, her silver hair swept up elegantly. "Rose," she said, squeezing my shoulder, "you look like a queen. And tonight, queens don't bow, they conquer." The words steadied me. Together, we walked into the grand hall. It was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting light on tables draped in white linen. Waiters glided through the room with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly at first, then gave way to a lively orchestra. Passengers twirled on the dance floor, laughter mingling with music. I forced myself to smile, to laugh, to play the role of a carefree woman on vacation. But every time I looked around, I spotted him, the man who had shadowed me by the pool. Tonight he wore a crisp white shirt and black jacket, blending in with the other guests, but his eyes never left me. Carol and I danced briefly, mingled with other passengers, and pretended to sip champagne. All the while, I kept my phone discreetly recording in my purse. Michael had already called once earlier that day, asking if I would be attending the gala, what time it would end, whether I planned to go straight to my cabin afterward. His voice had been syrupy sweet, but every question was a knife. Now, as the clock struck 11, Carol whispered, "It's time. Leave first. I'll follow 5 minutes later. Security is in position." My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might give me away. I excused myself from a conversation with a couple from Texas, feigning fatigue. "Such a lovely party," I said sweetly. "But I think I'll turn in." I walked slowly out of the hall, every step measured. Behind me, I could feel eyes following me. Whether they belonged to the man in the white shirt or Michael's paranoia carried across the sea, I didn't know, but I knew I had to act. I entered the elevator, pressed the button for the 8th floor, but when the doors closed, I quickly pressed another button, deck 12. I slipped out, hurried down the emergency stairwell, and crouched with Carol behind a small window overlooking the hallway to my cabin. The ship was quieter now. The hallways glowed dimly under night lights, shadows stretching long across the carpet. My cabin door stood innocently at the end of the corridor, flowers still fresh on the table outside. To anyone else, it was just another room. But tonight, it was bait. Minutes ticked by. My palms were slick with sweat, my breath shallow. Carol squeezed my hand. "Stay calm. He'll come." At 12:15, we saw him. The man in the white shirt slipped into the hallway, glancing around furtively. He walked directly to my cabin, pulled something from his pocket lock-picking tools, and began to work. My heart thudded so loud I was sure he could hear it. Within moments, the lock clicked. He slipped inside. We couldn't see him, but faint light flickered from his flashlight. Then he stepped onto the balcony, his gloved hands running along the railing, testing its strength. Carol and I exchanged a look. This was it. She pressed the panic device. A tiny red light blinked. Seconds later, 2 plainclothes security officers emerged at opposite ends of the hallway, moving silently toward my cabin. The man turned, startled, but it was too late. 3 more officers appeared, surrounding him. Shouts rang out, boots pounded against carpet. He tried to run, but within moments, he was pinned against the wall, hands wrenched behind his back. From our hiding place, I could hear his voice, desperate, lying. I thought it was my room. Wrong door. I wasn't doing anything. But when they searched him, they found the truth. Lockpicks, gloves, and most damning of all, a phone. A phone filled with messages from Michael. Wait until after the gala. Make it look like an accident. Balcony. No signs of struggle. My stomach lurched. Seeing it in black and white was worse than hearing it whispered in the dark. My son hadn't just plotted in theory. He had given instructions. He had scripted my death. The captain appeared moments later, his face grave. "Mrs. Miller, it's over. We caught him. And now we have everything we need." I gripped Carol's hand so tightly my knuckles ached. Relief, fury, sorrow all tangled inside me. I wasn't just fighting suspicion anymore. I had proof. And yet, as the man was dragged away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel the ache of a mother's broken heart. My only child had conspired to erase me from the world. And tomorrow, when we reached port, he would learn that the woman he thought was prey had just turned hunter. When the door slammed shut behind the officers dragging the man away, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for what felt like hours. My legs trembled, weak as though I had just run a marathon, but Carol's hand on my shoulder steadied me. "Rose," she whispered, her eyes blazing. "We did it. He's caught." But the relief was tangled with something darker. As we walked down the hallway toward my cabin, escorted by 2 members of security, I felt both triumph and grief. This wasn't a stranger's betrayal, it was my son's. The man they had just arrested hadn't acted alone. Every vile instruction on that phone came from Michael. Captain Harrison was waiting inside my cabin. He stood tall, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. "Mrs. Miller, Miss Baker," he said gravely, "you should know what we've found." The suspect was carrying not just tools and gloves, but direct instructions from Michael Miller, your son. He handed me the phone they'd confiscated. My eyes scanned the messages. There it was in black and white. "After midnight. Balcony. No struggle. Make it quick." I felt something inside me break, but not in a way that left me weaker. It was as if the last fragile thread that had tethered me to denial finally snapped. There was no room left for excuses. No chance to pretend Michael was still my boy. The evidence was right here, glowing coldly on the screen. My voice shook as I handed the phone back. "So that's it. He really wanted me gone." Captain Harrison's eyes softened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. I've seen greed drive people to dark places, but it's always hardest when it's family. The important thing is you're alive. And now we have proof." I nodded slowly. Alive. Proof. Words that should have comforted me, but instead felt like heavy stones pressing down on my chest. Carol, ever the fighter, leaned forward. "Captain, what happens now?" "The man will remain in our security cell until we dock. Then he'll be turned over to the authorities in Cozumel. We'll also provide you with all evidence collected, including the phone, surveillance footage, and our incident report. With that, you'll have an airtight case against your son." I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "And Michael? What happens to him?" The captain's gaze hardened. "That will be up to the authorities once you return to the United States. With evidence like this, they won't hesitate to act." Hearing those words brought both relief and dread. Relief that justice was within reach. Dread that justice meant my son, the boy I had rocked to sleep, the man I had sacrificed everything for, would be in handcuffs. Later that night, Carol and I returned to her suite, too shaken to sleep. We made tea, though neither of us drank it. We sat at her small table, the ship's gentle sway rocking us like a lullaby, though rest was impossible. "Rose," Carol said quietly, "do you understand what you've just done? You've not only survived your son's plot, you've beaten him at his own game. You're alive because you fought back." Tears stung my eyes. "I don't feel victorious, Carol. I feel hollow. What kind of mother outsmarts her son? What kind of son forces her to? Carol reached across the table, took my hand firmly. The kind of mother who raised herself from ashes again and again, and the kind of son who lost his way so badly he became his own mother's enemy. That's not on you, Rose. That's on him. Her words sank in, but the ache remained. My mind kept replaying memories, Michael's first day of school, his awkward teenage smile, the way he used to hug me so tight I could barely breathe. How had that boy turned into the man who wanted me erased for money? At dawn, a knock came at Carol's door. Captain Harrison himself entered, carrying a folder. "Mrs. Miller, I thought you'd want to see this. These are the surveillance stills from last night. They show the suspect entering your cabin and tampering with the balcony railing." I flipped through the photos. Each image was sharper than a knife. The man's gloved hands on the lock, the flashlight beam cutting across my empty room, his head bent over the railing, testing its strength. It was undeniable. If I'd followed Michael's instructions, if I'd returned to my cabin after the gala like a good little mother, I wouldn't be here. The captain placed the folder gently on the table. "Keep these. They'll help build your case." Carol spoke up. "Captain, what about Michael and Linda? Should Rose confront them now, or wait until she's back on land?" He shook his head firmly. "No confrontation until you're safe at home. People like that, they'll deny, manipulate, twist your words. But once the authorities have this evidence, there won't be room for denial." I nodded, though my heart ached. A part of me longed to call Michael immediately, to scream into the phone that I knew everything. But another part of me, the part that had grown sharper these last days, knew waiting was wiser. That afternoon, Detective Victor finally called through the ship's satellite line. His voice, calm and steady, was like an anchor. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "I've confirmed what you suspected. Michael has gambling debts over $200,000. He's been borrowing from dangerous people. But that's not all. He forged your signature on bank documents. He put your house up as collateral." I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. Every new revelation was another stone on my chest. Victor continued, "This was no spur-of-the-moment crime. He's been planning this for months. The cruise was the perfect opportunity. But now, with what you and the captain have gathered, we have a case so strong it can't be ignored." When the call ended, Carol exhaled sharply. "Rose, do you realize? You're not just surviving anymore. You're winning. You have everything you need to bury his plan before he could bury you." But winning felt like losing too, because victory meant proving my son was not just flawed, not just desperate, but willing to kill me for money. That night, as the ship cut across dark waters, I stood on Carol's balcony, staring out at the endless sea. The waves rose and fell, glittering faintly under the moonlight. I thought about how easily one slip, one push, would have erased me from this world, and how easily Michael had assumed no one would care enough to ask questions. But he was wrong. I was still here. And tomorrow, when we docked, I would step onto land not as a victim, but as a mother who refused to be erased. "Michael," I whispered into the night, "you thought you had me cornered, but you forgot something. You forgot who taught you how to fight." And in that moment, for the first time, I felt not just fear or grief, but power. The morning we docked in Cozumel, the ship bustled with the usual chatter of passengers eager to disembark for sun-soaked excursions. But for me, there was no excitement, no sense of vacation. There was only a grim anticipation. Because today was the day everything Michael had built on lies and greed would collapse. Captain Harrison met Carol and me in his office just after sunrise. He laid a heavy folder on the desk inside, were photographs, security reports, and the suspect's phone. "Mrs. Miller," he said firmly, "I want you to understand. With this evidence, you don't just have suspicion, you have proof. When you return home, the authorities will have everything they need." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I touched the folder. The weight of it felt symbolic, as if I were holding not just papers, but the truth itself. Carol leaned in. "What about the man they caught?" "He'll be handed over to Mexican authorities here at port," the captain replied. "He's already confessed to entering Mrs. Miller's cabin. The messages on his phone tie him directly to your son. Once we pass this evidence along, law enforcement back in the U.S. will take immediate action." The captain's words were steady, but inside me emotions swirled like a hurricane. Relief, sorrow, rage, even guilt. How could a mother hand over the key to destroying her own child's life? But how could she not, when that child had already tried to destroy hers? By the time Carol and I stepped off the ship, my decision was carved in stone. When I landed back in Chicago the following afternoon, Detective Victor was waiting at the airport. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, with streaks of gray at his temples and sharp, assessing eyes. He shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "what you did out there was remarkable. Most people wouldn't have survived that. You not only survived, you built the case yourself." "Detective," I said, my voice steady, "I didn't fight for victory. I fought because I had no other choice. But now, I need to finish this." We went straight to the district attorney's office. Carlos Mendoza, a stern man with a piercing gaze, spread the evidence across his desk. He studied each photo, each message, each report with the precision of a surgeon. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "In my 15 years as prosecutor," he said slowly, "I've never seen a case so thoroughly documented by the victim herself. Mrs. Miller, this is rock solid. We'll file charges immediately." Hearing the words was like stepping into a cold shower. It shocked me, shook me, but also stripped away the last of my hesitation. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Mendoza said, "we issue arrest warrants. Attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, fraud. Your son and his wife will not walk free after today." 2 hours later, I sat in my own living room, the one Michael had tried to steal through forged documents. The air felt different, heavy, charged. Detective Victor sat across from me, his phone on the table. We waited. At 6 o'clock sharp, it rang. Mendoza's voice crackled through. "Mrs. Miller, it's done. Michael and Linda were taken into custody an hour ago. They were packing suitcases, preparing to flee the country. Tickets to Argentina. They won't be going anywhere now." I closed my eyes, a wave of emotion crashing through me. Relief, grief, triumph, devastation. My son was in handcuffs. My daughter-in-law, too. The people I had sacrificed decades of my life for were behind bars. "What will happen to them?" I asked softly. "They'll be arraigned tomorrow," Mendoza replied. "With the evidence we have, conviction is almost certain. Your son faces up to 20 years. Linda, up to 10. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I thought of Michael as a baby, as a teenager, as the man who once hugged me after his wedding. Then I thought of Michael's cold voice on the phone, telling Linda I was a one-way ticket. Both memories belonged to the same person. That realization hollowed me out. Carol called later that night. "Rose," she said, her voice warm but steady. "I know this hurts, but justice doesn't erase love. It just holds people accountable. You gave Michael every chance to choose differently. He made his choice." Her words carried me through the night. The following months were a blur of legal proceedings. I testified in court, my voice trembling but unwavering as I described the plan I'd overheard, the cruise, the accomplice, the recordings. Michael sat only feet away, his eyes empty, his expression cold. Linda wept silently beside him, but I knew her tears weren't for me, they were for herself. The jury didn't take long. Michael was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Linda received 8. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel joy. I didn't cheer or smile. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom, because Michael had taken more from me than money. He had stolen my peace, my faith, my trust in the child I had raised, but he had failed to take my life. And now, with justice served, I could begin the long process of reclaiming myself. That night, back in my new apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I whispered into the night, though no one could hear. "Michael, you thought you had written my ending, but I wrote my own, and you'll spend every day of the next 18 years remembering the mother you underestimated." Carol visited me weeks later. She hugged me tightly, her silver hair brushing against my cheek. "Rose, you didn't just survive, you transformed, and I hope you know you're not alone anymore." I smiled through tears. "I know, Carol. I finally know." The trial ended, the sentence was handed down, and just like that, the storm that had consumed my life for months began to fade. But what remained was not silence. It was clarity. For the first time in decades, I was free. I sold the old house where I had spent years stitching clothes late into the night, where I had sat up waiting for Michael to come home from college, where I had stood in the kitchen listening to his betrayal through the crack of the door. That house was no longer a home. It was a tomb of memories, a place soaked in sacrifice and pain. With the money, I bought a small apartment in a quiet part of the city. Nothing extravagant, just enough for me. A warm living room filled with sunlight. A modest balcony with flowers I tended myself. For the first time, every corner belonged to me alone. No child to please, no husband to wait on, no sacrifices left to make. And I began to live. Carol became my closest friend, my sister in spirit. We called each other weekly, laughed about little things, cried when old wounds surfaced. Sometimes she visited from Miami, and we'd walk through the park arm in arm like girls again, free from the weight of everyone else's expectations. But the biggest change was not outside, it was inside me. I had lived 64 years believing my worth was measured by what I gave to others, that my life's purpose was to serve, to sacrifice, to provide. But the cruise, the betrayal, the fight for survival, it had all forced me to ask a question I'd never dared ask before. What if my life belongs to me? So I started small. Dance classes at the community center, painting lessons, even though my hands shook with the brush. Volunteering at a women's shelter, where I shared my story with others who thought they were powerless. The first time I told the women at the shelter what had happened, that my own son had plotted to kill me for money, there was silence in the room. Not disbelief, but recognition. Because every woman there had her own story of betrayal, of being underestimated, of giving until nothing was left. Ladies, I told them, my voice trembling but firm, I'm here because I chose to fight, and if I could do it at 64, on a ship in the middle of the sea, you can do it too. Don't let anyone, husband, child, family, convince you that your life belongs to them. It belongs to you. Some of the women cried. Others nodded, their eyes shining with a spark. I recognized the spark of waking up after years of silence. That day, I realized something profound. Michael had tried to erase me, but instead, he had given me a new purpose, to make sure no other woman felt powerless again. Months passed, then a year. My steps grew lighter. My laughter came easier. At 66, I joined a salsa class. At 67, I traveled to Italy with Carol, sipping wine in Florence and watching the sun set over the canals of Venice. For the first time, I wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caretaker. I was simply Rose. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet, memories returned. Michael's baby smile, his small hand gripping mine, his teenage voice calling, "Mom, I need you." They pierced me like needles, because no matter what he had done, a part of me still remembered the boy I once loved without question. But then I would remind myself, that boy had made his choices, and I had made mine. He had chosen greed. I had chosen survival. One day, Carol asked me, "Rose, do you ever regret it? Exposing him? Testifying? Sending him to prison?" I thought about it long and hard before answering. "No," I said finally, "because regret is for people who had other options. Michael took away my choice to be only a mother. He forced me to become my own savior. And when a woman saves herself, she doesn't regret it. She rebuilds." Carol smiled softly. "Then you've rebuilt beautifully." And she was right. I had. Today, as I sit by the window of my little apartment, the afternoon sun painting golden stripes across the floor, I feel something I never thought I'd feel again. Peace. Not because my life is perfect, not because betrayal has disappeared, but because I discovered something that had been hidden inside me all along. Strength. The kind of strength you only find when the world tries to break you, and you refuse to bend. So now, if you're listening to my story, I want to ask you, have you ever been betrayed by the people who should have loved you most? Have you ever been underestimated, treated as if your life belonged to someone else? If so, remember this: you are stronger than they think, stronger than you think. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger or punishment. It's living fully, freely, without fear. Because that's what I did. My name is Rose Miller. I am 68 years old. My son thought he was giving me a one-way ticket to death. But instead, I turned it into my one-way ticket to life. And if you're watching this right now, I want you to take something from me. Never let anyone write the end of your story. That pen belongs only to you. Now, tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever discovered your own strength when you least expected it? Share it in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories of betrayal, survival, and the sweet taste of justice. Because in the end, justice isn't just something you wait for. Justice is something you become.